I think if you are interested in living a life of honesty, if you want to know the truth, and if you want the truth to set you free, which you don't have to, you don't, and you don't, you really don't. But I think if you want that, I think questions are a part of the deal.
Hi, this is Monica Packer, and you're listening to About Progress, where we are about progress made practical. One of the most popular episodes I've ever released, over now close to 700 episodes, was also my most vulnerable one, about how I struggled with my religious faith. Over the years, I have received literally hundreds and hundreds of messages about this single episode, from those in my faith and from those in other Christian denominations, but also from those who are Jewish, Muslim, and beyond. As good and as validating as it was to share in the struggle of spiritual uncertainty, my own uncertainty didn't end there. My wrestle with God has continued to this very day. Along the way, I found an unexpected companionship with evangelical Christian women who I found could relate to so much of why and how I've struggled with my Christian denomination. Erin H. Moon is one of these women. As a biblical scholar, writer, and podcaster with a sometimes irreverent but always educational faith podcast called Faith Adjacent, she is no stranger to grappling with major questions of faith, spirituality, and religion. I have learned a great deal from Erin thanks to this podcast, and also from her first book, which I absolutely devoured, called I've Got Questions. If there's one big thing I have learned from Erin, it's that God wants your questions. That is what we will be discussing today: how to navigate the great difficulty in having spiritual questions that rock the foundation to your faith, why it feels so scary, and ways to move through it all with grace, curiosity, and courage, and as part of that, how to make better peace with uncertainty. I know this is traditionally a personal development podcast, but I've seen time and time again that our faith is a big part of our development. Seeing as this episode is more geared towards those of Christian faith, and not even a specific one at that, I will own that this interview may not be for everyone, but I do know that this episode is for those whose struggles with faith take up a great deal of time and energy and soul, and for those who aren't looking for prescriptive answers, but to feel less alone as they find their own. Erin Hicks Moon is a writer, podcaster, and storyteller who helps people disentangle faith by creating a kind and curious community that welcomes honest doubt and questions. She is the resident Bible scholar and host of the Faith Adjacent podcast, and senior creative at Podcast Media Group. A homesick Texan, she lives in Birmingham, Alabama with her husband and 3 children, where she bravely tries to live without yellow queso every day. That interview is coming up after a quick break for our sponsors. My love of having cleaner indoor air must be something you all know about me by now, because one of my most common questions that comes in on my direct messages is, what's that air purifier again? Well, it's Air Doctor, the award-winning air purifier that eliminates 99.99% of dangerous contaminants like allergens, viruses, smoke, gases, mold spores, and more. Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors, but did you know that indoor air can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air? We know it in the Packer household because one of our kids happens to have pretty bad indoor allergies, and our new doctor was relieved to hear that we already have an air purifier in our home. Unlike other purifiers, Air Doctor captures invisible particles 100 times smaller than standard HEPA filters, making the Packer household very happy customers. I recently burned something in my oven, and I was so happy to see that my Air Doctor kicked right into high gear automatically all on its own because it could sense that something was a little bit off in our main area. You can experience the joy of Air Doctor and breathe cleaner. Just head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code Monica to get up to $300 off today. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, plus a 3-year warranty, and $84 value free. Get this exclusive podcast-only offer now at airdoctorpro.com. That's airdoctorpro.com using promo code Monica. One of the ways I'm filling my cup is returning more to my teaching roots and offering affordable online workshops to this community on very niche topics that I know you both want and need. I recently did the How to Dream Again workshop, helping women gain clarity on what more they want in their lives. And coming up, I'll be teaching the Best Summer Ever workshop, practically guiding women to craft a summer for the scrapbooks. More online workshops are coming, but you can get information on and access to these workshops and the replays by going to aboutprogress.com/workshops. For just $17, you can invest some time and thought into making progress in your life and in ways per usual to this community that are both deep and practical. Again, check out what's available by going to aboutprogress.com/workshops, and workshops is plural. Erin H. Moon, welcome to About Progress.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a privilege for me. I loved your book so much. I've got it here. I'm going to put it on display for those who are watching this episode. And you write in this book, I've got questions that, quote, having it out with God is our spiritual heritage. Wrestling isn't the problem, it's the point, unquote. And that to me was just a relief in a sentence. It just felt visceral to me.
I'm glad.
But I know this because I follow you, I've read your book, but I wanted our community to understand what brought you to that point of accepting that this is my heritage to wrestle.
Mm-hmm. I think, when I grew up evangelical and there was just so many things that I kind of accepted at face value, which I think is a totally normal thing to do when you're a kid. And as I kind of grew and learned and started taking my faith more seriously, I started looking at some of these things that I had just kind of accepted and wanted to better understand them. And as I started to look at scripture, as I started to kind of learn more about the history of what I believed in my faith and Christianity in general, I started noticing just this sort of pattern of this is not a group of people who just sort of were like, they got a word from God and they were like, great, got it, gonna go do it and no questions asked.
Yeah.
And really, I noticed that specifically from the story of Jacob and Esau, Jacob and Esau. And Amy Jill Levine is a Jewish scholar and writer, and she actually writes a lot about Christianity and Jesus, which I think is very interesting from a Jewish perspective. But she talks a lot about how when Jacob wrestled the angel of the Lord, after he went on this, this long kind of, journey, long night of the soul sort of a situation when he wrestled. And at the end of that, God gave him a new name. And the name was Israel. And we don't know a lot about the etymology of the name of Israel, but a lot of scholars think it means like to wrestle, to grapple, that's kind of what they think it means. And not only did God give Jacob that name, he gave his people that name. And I find that to be very interesting. We are not the people who obey blindly. We are not the people who just say yes. We are the people who wrestle. And so to me, that really kind of opened up a lot of, it is a part of who we are to ask questions, to wonder about things. God has not asked us to just kind of go, yes, good, got it. I'm on it and I'll do whatever you say. I think God expects us to ask questions. God's not surprised that we're human. And God's not surprised that this is a hard thing. Faith is a hard thing. And so that brought a lot of comfort to me when I started looking at that story through that lens. I think that was really helpful.
I think one of my moments was learning about Mother Teresa years ago. And you reference that in your book too, right? When I was like, wow, if Mother Teresa could have struggled with her faith for decades, and in
Yes.
such an intense way, then maybe I'm okay too.
Yes.
And yet,
And
go
that's
ahead.
a pattern we see for, I mean, so many. Martin Luther King, Julian of Norwich. I mean,
Yeah.
so almost everyone who we know about as a like quote unquote famous, spiritual person, they had these same type of struggles. They were like they did not famously believe all the time. And there's a reason for that. And I think it's because that's the point of this whole thing.
Yeah, let's just needlepoint that.
Yeah.
That's
100%.
the point. Well, you talked about, it being common among believers, even
Mhm.
more than we think, even the most devout, in quotes, among
Yeah.
people that we can see as faithful believers of any sort. But at the same time, if it's our spiritual heritage, why do we get so stuck on certainty in our modern times? And why do you think we're in this place that any questioning is seen as a lack of faith when really it is, as you've been saying, like this is faith to question?
I think we get stuck on certainty because it feels really safe and our brains love to feel safe.
Mm.
Um, there is a comfort to knowing exactly. I mean, I have my routines every morning, every evening when I come into work every day. I know exactly what I'm going to do.
Mm.
I have a uniform that I wear pretty much every day. I know my schedules. My kids know their schedules. They know how the days are going to look. That makes them feel safe. That comforts them. When my kids don't know what we're going to eat for dinner, they like freak out because they are creatures of habit. It makes them feel very safe. And I think when we have questions about something as big as God and spirituality and faith, that's terrifying. And especially growing up evangelical, if you grew up that way, you have rapture trauma. You have,
I was
you
just
have
talking to my best friend who grew up Baptist about that last night.
yes, absolutely. And that puts like this kind of tyranny of the urgent on you, which is, hey, you got to have all this figured out. And because if you don't, if you die, it's a bad deal, like permanently. And that creates just that terror within you. And so I think that whether consciously or unconsciously, we carry that around with us. Even if we've technically moved past that belief, we do carry that around with us. And so, I think it's very easy. And plus, if you have decided in your own soul or whatever, you've got it, okay, I've decided what I believe, everything is good, and then you see someone who is asking questions, kind of walking through their own kind of deconstruction, reconstruction journey, that feels like a threat.
Yeah.
And you go, well, maybe I'm not safe. Maybe they're right. And that feels very threatening. And I think it is that can make you feel unmoored. And if they're unraveling their sweater, what happens if you unravel your sweater? And so I think we like to feel that safety, that sense of connection with other people. And when that gets threatened, it can be a really scary experience.
You spoke to some of the internal pressures we face. I think you're so right. So much of it is fear-based, but also kind of rightfully so, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
there's external pressures too that push that fear. I was wondering if you could speak to those as well.
Yeah, I think isolation is a big one. If you're a part of a faith community and, being a part of a faith community means that you have in some ways agreed upon a certain number of beliefs. And that's why you're a part of this faith community. Maybe that's a creed, maybe that's a certain amount of doctrines, maybe that's a baptism, understanding or whatever. If you start to question those things, that means you're on the outside of those. And that can mean that you are isolated. That can mean that you are no longer a part of that group. And which means you're losing your community. Maybe you're losing your church. Maybe you're losing your small group. Maybe you're losing all of your friends or all of your family. Maybe you and your spouse aren't agreeing anymore. Maybe you and your kids aren't agreeing anymore. And that's at the core. That's a sense of belonging. And that right there will speak to a very, very deep place of who you are. So
Hmm.
I don't actually begrudge anyone for having that kind of fear. But I do think that there will be a time when you have to decide, am I willing to put aside these questions, knowing that the people that I love and that claim to love me don't love me enough to let me ask these questions? And that's a hard thing to do. It really is. And I don't blame anyone for being scared of that, because it's scary.
Well, that isolation piece, I think, is so clear when we see that from the outside too. But as you said, it's an isolation from belonging and including belonging to yourself. So in questioning, you're not just questioning some like thing outside of you, you're questioning who you are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because you've built, I mean, I know for myself, I had built my entire identity. I mean, my spirituality was tied to my job. It was tied to my friend group, my marriage, my children, everything. And so, gosh, you pull that string, and who even am I? And that's really terrifying.
You said you would reach a point though where you can no longer try to like bridge that gap. Like you're doing the splits now. So something's got to give.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you, and how would someone know that it's their time?
You know, I think that's for me, it wasn't like, here's the point, and, you can, two roads diverged in a wood. I think that can happen for people. Absolutely. For me, it was much slower. It was much, I started asking questions about stuff in college, and, it took me until, and I'm still doing that. And I think that can be a process that comes with you your entire life. And I hope it is, because I really do believe that an active faith is one that is constantly kind of turning over the soil and, looking for roots or rot and what's underneath, this plant, or what are we doing here? That I think that's a part of it. But I think there can be, a fixed point. Your child can come out, a church can break up. There can be a death in the family, that you can lose a job. There can be that traumatic kind of fixed point sort of a situation. But I don't think it has to be that. I think there can be lots of different ways that you can kind of start to go, hold on, I don't actually know if what I thought I believed is actually holding up in the real world.
And I know part of your own path was realizing what you actually believe, what it meant to be a Christian, didn't hold up to the way that you felt other Christians were living up to those standards that you thought should be shared.
And honestly, I include myself in that. Like, it wasn't just that I saw like them out there.
Sure.
It was like, oh, me too.
Yeah.
Me also.
Well, it's good to have that awareness.
Well, it's just
To have it forced
very
on you.
blinding.
Yeah. Those moments of humility, right, are really important too. I like that in your path that it was so gradual, because in my own experience and from what I've heard from so many others is that often is what it looks like. It is so gradual. It doesn't have to be a circumstantial big moment or trigger, but it can still feel just as jarring, right? When you finally get to that point where you're like, wait, I am at that point, and I don't know when and how it happened, but I'm here.
Yeah.
And you speak in your book about the real grief that can come as we question. And I know there's stages of grief. I think we can all rattle those off, but I think there's stages of particular unique stages of grieving what you thought you knew and what you know now and who you thought you were and who you actually are, and how that all has to do with faith deconstruction and then reconstruction. And I was just wondering if you could give us any markers of what that path looks like. And again, I know it's likely so subjective, but you've done this work for a long time and helped so many others. So what should they be expecting there?
Yeah. So I think for me, what I kind of started off at is I wanted to really examine kind of my origins, where I came from. I don't think that you can really understand where you're going unless you know where you came from. And so I went back and just sort of really went through the file folders of my beginnings and was interested in the things that shaped me, the pastors that I had, the Bible studies that I went through. And a lot of that was, I went through purity culture, and I did not have the typical Southern Baptist evangelical upbringing that I know a lot of people did now. It was I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood pastor that I actually still speak to. He's an amazing man. And my parents were excellent. I also grew up in purity culture, which was, traumatic in its own way. And, these types of things. And then, so it was very helpful for me to kind of understand the soil in which I grew up in. And then I think the next thing for me to do was, I'm not very good at, being sad. I would rather not.
I would rather be mad. And I think
yes,
you're the same from
yes,
what I know of you.
I would much rather be angry.
Yeah.
And when like someone is going through a difficult time, let me drop a casserole off. I don't want to sit with you in that. It's very difficult for me. But I needed to really become acquainted with lament and grief, because there were so many things about not only my upbringing, but the way that I saw the world and the way I understood the world, and that bumping up against my faith and how I saw God and how, God saw me, and all of these things that I needed to grieve. And so I learned a lot about different grief practices and that type of a thing, and just really started becoming better acquainted with the practice of grief, which I hate. And if you can avoid it, great, but I don't think we can.
I don't think we can either.
Yeah, it's necessary.
Can you share one in particular that was really helpful for you?
Yeah, the Jewish practice of sitting Shiva is a rich text, and I actually have a whole chapter about it in the book. That it's so deeply metaphorical. I mean, it's practical as well, but there's just so many ways that you can interpret so many facets of it. And it's just really it's stunning. And it offers you a process. It offers you a way to kind of walk through grief, as opposed to just where I was like, let's just lay in bed and eat potato chips until you're not sad anymore. And that's, which is a strategy, but I don't know that it's a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah,
that was deeply feeling. That's
right.
What that gave you that opportunity to do.
Absolutely. And I'm an Enneagram 3, which is I feel things, but I don't know what they are. And so that was actually very helpful for me to kind of get my hands around what I was feeling, and understanding what it was. So, and then I just wanted to ask a lot of questions. I had a lot of questions about the Bible and about scripture and about God and about faith and about what we're supposed to be doing here and why this is set up this way. And so I just kind of vomited all of those questions out, and that was really powerful for me. And I started looking at like the things that, if I was going to continue to be a Christian, if I was going to continue to believe in God, what were the things that were going to keep me from doing that? Like, what were my pressure points is what I kind of ended up calling them. And then I really wanted to, there's this idea, I think, in faith that you have boundaries that you're not really allowed to go past. And if you go past those boundaries, you're backsliding, you're a heretic. You're
the frog boiling.
Exactly. 100%. Peter Pagan, Katie Christian, that kind of a thing. If you grew up in the youth group, you know what I'm talking about. But the more I kind of started looking over the fence to see what was out there, I was like, I don't know if some of these are as bad as we thought they were. I don't know. I don't know if these are. I would like to check these out. And so I sort of hopped the fence, and I wanted to see, not necessarily that I would keep them, but I wanted to see what they were about. And knowing that wasn't necessarily something that was gonna, land me in the 8th circle of hell or whatever, but that I could go foraging, and I could go seeing what was, what else was out there. And I had a lot of fun doing it, honestly.
Yeah.
And then there was this practice that I was very interested in that was, you're not going to get answers to all of your questions because that's not how this works. I'm not going to know why bad things happen to good people. I'm not going to know A, B, and C of all of the things that I want to know on this side of eternity. And making peace with that and making peace with God and learning to decide if that was enough to continue having faith. And then just kind of this process of rebuilding my faith. And what does that look like? Andy Squires, who's one of my favorite songwriters, he talks about like kind of taking your deconstruction and almost going back and reconstructing your deconstruction. And I've always loved that idea of like, we go back to the things that we began in because we see them now for what they are. And they weren't bad to begin with, but now they have a fresh view. We have a fresh view of them. And just kind of rebuilding some of those things from a different lens. And but that was my process. And I think everybody has their own. And I don't know that this process is ever over. I don't know that you ever complete it. And I don't know that I want it to ever be complete. Because the faith that I experience now, it seems to me so much more active than this kind of checklist faith that I had previously, which was do your quiet time, pray for 20 minutes with the Acts method, make sure that you journal, and have you talked to 3 people about Jesus today? And that wasn't, which is fine, I guess, but it didn't mean anything to me. My relationship that I have with Jesus now, I feel like it means something to me. It is an actual relationship as opposed to me just checking boxes.
This podcast is sponsored by Go Pure Beauty. You may already know this about me, but I love skincare. I have been so hyper diligent about taking care of my face since my early 20s, thanks to a great dermatologist I happened to visit at the time. But guess what I forgot about for most of those years? My neck. Did you forget too? The skin on your neck is thinner, more delicate, and less oily than facial skin, so it requires special care. That's why Go Pure Beauty developed their revolutionary Tighten and Lift Neck Cream. Powered by clinically proven active ingredients, this advanced formula is designed to visibly firm, smooth, and rejuvenate the delicate skin on your neck and chest in as little as 4 to 8 weeks. I've been using the Tighten and Lift Neck Cream, and I've been loving it. The silky texture is so nice. My very sensitive skin has responded to it very well. And that's thanks to it being paraben and sulfate-free and made without harsh chemicals. For a limited time, our listeners get 25% off Go Pure with code PROGRESS at checkout. And Go Pure isn't just about your neck. They have a full line of science-backed skin and body care to brighten, hydrate, and restore your glow from head to toe. From powerful vitamin C serums to deeply hydrating retinol moisturizers, every product is packed with clean, effective ingredients that deliver real results. With over 1 million jars sold, this beauty secret is no longer a secret. For a limited time, our listeners get 25% off Go Pure with code PROGRESS at checkout. Just head to gopurebeauty.com/progress, use code PROGRESS, and you're all set. And after you buy, do us a favor. When they ask where you heard about Go Pure, tell them it was from our show. For years, I have been teaching women how to do habits differently. I have been so grateful to see the concepts that have changed the most for you with responses from women of our community, like you are changing the habit game for all of us. And this is so needed. And you should write a book on this. Well, guess what? I am. And I'm so eager for you to get your hands on it, hopefully sometime in 2026. And since I can't share the title yet, and also since I may end up self-publishing, I need a committee of gal pals, if you will, like you, who are ready to be my early test readers, to pre-order the book, and to act as grassroots publicists the moment each of those steps are made ready. Would you like to be on that book launch committee? get on the free list by going to aboutprogress.com/book committee. Even if you just want to be the first in the know with any book news, that's where you sign up. Again, go to aboutprogress.com/book committee. It's in the show notes for you. I can't wait to share as much as I can with you along the way, and I am already so grateful for your support. And that ultimately is the goal. I'm
hope
glad you'd
so.
share your process, though, because I think it can give people kind of some checkpoints or some things they can try. And I'm sure it's, going back and forth
Oh,
or over and
yeah.
under all of that.
I had a friend once who, and this was probably when I was in college, and it blew my mind. And it feels so elementary now, but it completely shook me. And I remember him drawing a line on a board, and he was like, I feel like sometimes we look at our lives with Jesus like a line, like we're trying to go somewhere, like we're getting to the end of something. And then like underneath it, he drew this like big squiggle, and he was like, I actually think we just keep coming back around. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh,
Mm,
like it's not like a race or like, and he was like, no, I don't think it is. And I was like, that kind of, I don't know. Because
yeah.
I think in Western American culture, I think we gamify everything and we make everything be a race or a destination. And I'm just not sure that that's exactly what it is. I think we may have put a little more competition into it than is
Mm-hmm.
exactly necessary.
Well, and it kind of speaks back to what you were saying about certainty. A part of why I think we struggle with the circle, the spiral, rather than the line is because we love thinking that there's an arrival.
Oh, yeah. And you don't get to the end of your faith and there's like the princess in the castle
Uh-huh.
and you jump on the flag and you beat the big boss. Like that doesn't happen. There's no like end to it. It's just it's life with God, and it's up and down and it's sideways, but there's no finale to it, I don't think.
And I think that's partly what you have to grieve is that
Oh,
there is no
yes,
end. There's no
absolutely.
arrival.
Yes, there's nobody, you're not getting a ribbon at the end for first place.
Yeah, I wish we could. I
I
wish
wish
we
we could
could.
too.
So I'm actually curious about the stage where you were looking over the fence, which I'm
Hmm.
sure is still ongoing. Was there anything that surprised you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine telling like 13-year-old me that I was like, hey, I don't know that hell exists in the way that we thought it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
She would freak out about that. Richard Rohr talks about the three boxes. The first box that you have, which is like, here are all the things that I need to know and I need to understand because my brain needs like containment.
Mm-hmm.
My brain needs enclosure. And so it's order, right? You've got this box of order. And then the next box is disorder. And you're taking everything out of the box because you're like, I don't even like, why do I even have all this stuff in this box? I got to get it out. I got to look at it. I got to see what it is. Did I even put all this stuff in this box? Who put this stuff in this box for me? And then the next box, after you've taken everything out and looked at it, is a box of reorder. And you're putting, okay, I took these things out. I looked at them. Some of them, I'm not putting them back in. Some of them I am putting them back in.
Hmm.
And I think there are lots of ways that you can look at deconstruction and reconstruction. And there are ways that we can kind of almost talk back to our former selves and go, hey, you believed that for a reason.
Mm.
And you don't have to feel bad about that. You don't like, we don't have to shame you for that. You believed that because you were told that, because you didn't have a prefrontal cortex yet. And you needed to do that. Like you needed to understand it that way. That's okay.
Hmm.
It's totally fine. But we're moving in a different direction, or we understand something in a better way now. And we can leave that behind, or we can like kind of hold on to both things because we just don't really know. Like there are lots of smart people who think about this in a really different way. And so we don't know, but we can, here's 3 different ways we can think about this, and we can just move forward with those 3 different ways because we just don't know.
You spoke of the former self and the compassion that you can have to that. I think that helps so much remove the anger piece of it. so that you can actually process it differently.
And the shame too.
The
I think.
shame. Yeah. Yeah. And as part of that, I think of often in this conversation I had with a friend where we were in a similar place of just feeling all those feelings, right? And the disappointment of no longer being able to have certainty that you used to have. And my friend expressed sadness that she could never go back to that black and white faith. And that even that was really hard for her to process. Like,
Yeah.
I can't ever go back. I know you've done that. So what would you say to someone who's at that point of mourning that piece of their life?
I think, one, let the mourning happen. Don't try to talk yourself out of it. Don't try to shame yourself or, be frustrated with yourself about it, because it's valid. But also know that faith and that certainty, that's a lie. It was always a lie. It wasn't real. And what you believed, it was never going to hold up in the real world. And there was never any future for you to keep it. And that's hard. That's a really hard thing to come to terms with. I look at so many people now and I'm like, wow, that seems nice. It seems very nice the way you're living. I would love to have less self-awareness. Sounds great. But that's not a real way to live. I think that as hard as it is to know that certainty doesn't exist and that we have to actually engage our hearts and actually engage our brains and our spirits, it is better than believing something that isn't real, believing a lie of certainty that doesn't actually exist. But to honor the loss and to mourn it for sure. For sure.
We talked about there is no arrival. So the question I have next for you is not about like, what's on the other side of this, like when we're done, but it is more of like in the process of this, of reshaping what it looks like to be a person of faith, which is synonymous with being a person of questions. What is better then? What is better for you? What do you see as better in others as they're willing to move through this instead of avoid it, pretend it's not happening?
I think if you are interested in living a life of honesty, if you want to know the truth, and if you want the truth to set you free, which you don't have to, you don't, and you don't, you really don't. I think there's a life to be lived where you don't, but I think if you want that, I think questions are a part of the deal. I think you have to decide if truth is worth it to you. I think you have to decide if you want the answers or if you want Jesus. And one is the way, the truth, and the life. And one will make you feel certain in your time here. And unfortunately, the two might be mutually exclusive, and they have been in my experience. And so for me, I'm not certain about anything, like hardly anything at all. But I do have a friendship with Jesus. And that is very valuable to me. And it is very meaningful to me. I find my friendship with Jesus to be very life-giving, because I can't have a friendship with certainty, because I don't get anything out of that at all. So I think that is the decision that you have to make. You have to decide which one is better. And that's the choice.
Would it be accurate to say that you have less certainty but more peace? At least more peace in the process of not being certain?
I say that, and maybe so. Yeah. I don't know that I have a lot of peace. I think I have a lot of I think I have a lot of patience now. I think I have more patience, and I think I have a better understanding, not of God, but of I have a better sense of what I can't control.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what it is. Maybe that
Mhm.
and that like I am here at the will of Holy Spirit. I'm here. I have a small collection of things that I've been asked to do, mainly be with my family, teach my children, go to my job, love my husband, love my family, these types of things. And if I can be faithful in those things, I can't control so much. There's so many things that I can't control. And I cannot be certain about so many theological things, so many like great big spiritual massive questions that we have, but I can know that I have a friendship with Jesus. And to me, that is much better than pretending and lying to myself that I know answers to things that I I I absolutely do not.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
It's like it may not be as much peace in terms of having answers, but more like peace with the uncertainty and peace with
Yes.
yourself
Yes. I think that's a
and
fair thing to say. Yeah,
patience with those things.
absolutely.
Well, for people who want that, I'm going to again refer them to your book. I've got questions. It was so beautifully written,
Thank you.
and researched too. I loved how we got to know more of your story, of course, but it wasn't just an anecdotal book, which to me is powerful because it's something I can not only get your experience on, but learn from on how to work through my own spiritual practice of having it out with God. Is there anything you want someone to know about this book?
The biggest takeaway for me is God wants your honesty. God wants you to be a person, and God knows you're a person. He's not surprised by that, and that's where you can start. There is a starting point to this, and it is your absolute total honesty, and that is what God is ready for.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, before I ask my final question, I want to make sure we refer them to wherever you'd like them to go besides getting the book. Where should they go?
I am on the interwebs at Erin H Moon everywhere. Substack, Instagram, all the places. So that is
Great.
where you can find me.
Okay, well, we will link to those things. We like to always end by asking what is one small way listeners can take action on what they learned today. It may be what you just said.
I mean,
but
it may be
that's
like
okay.
it genuinely may be. I think, I think so often we feel like we have to edit ourselves for God. We have to, we're waiting to come to God with, I've got all my theology figured out. I've got, everything's in a perfect line. And now I can come. That's not true. There is only honesty. Vulnerability is where we make connections with one another. And God desires your vulnerability. So
Beautiful. I think it's the best note to end on. Erin H. Moon, thank you very much for your time today.
thank you so much for having me.
Last second, I'm like, throw in the H. You make sure there's an H there. I hope this episode gave you the hug and kick in the pants you need to grow. I'll now share the progress pointers. These are the notes I took so you don't have to. And those on my newsletter get them in a graphic form each week. You can sign up at aboutprogress.com/newsletter. Number 1, certainty makes us feel safe. So it makes sense that having questions of faith can feel like a threat to our certainty. Number 2, other things that may add to the fear include potential isolation, division from others, loneliness, a crisis of identity, and more. Number 3, owning that it's part of our spiritual heritage to wrestle, to ask hard questions, can help us move through the fear differently. Number 4, some steps to, quote, having it out with God include become acquainted with your own spiritual story, learn how to grieve, Ask lots of questions, make peace with uncertainty, and rebuild your faith. And number 5, there is no end to this. It's an ongoing process. Carry a lot of compassion to this path, to your former spiritual self, where you are now, and where you're headed. Your Do Something challenge this week is to get vulnerable with God. I would love to hear about how you do that. You can message me on Instagram at About Progress, or you can email me at hello@aboutprogress.com. While I was so eager to have this conversation with Erin, I have to admit it was a little scary to air this, but I know in advance that our community here is very open and kind and curious, and I expect that response to a trickier topic than we may typically navigate on the podcast. This podcast is listener supported. Members of the Supporters Club make my work with About Progress free and available to all, and they get access to 3 levels of exclusive benefits from more time to more content with me. I would love for you to consider to become a supporter by going to aboutprogress.com/support. You can always support the show for free though. Please leave a review, make sure you've subscribed, share the show with a friend, and really important right now, subscribe to us on YouTube and watch the podcast there if you like video kind of content. Thank you so much for listening. Now go and do something with what you learned today. Please leave a review, make sure you've subscribed, share the show with a friend, and really important right now, subscribe to us on YouTube and listen there. And watch the podcast there if you like video kind of content.